Hey YouTube, GT40 Fan 1 here. I'm going to be doing a video on how to reassemble a Ruger Mark III. Hopefully you've already seen my video on how to disassemble the firearm, but this is the reassembly. Hope you enjoy it. You're going to start with the trigger group. So we'll grab the plunger and the spring. Slide that in. Notch on the notch on this plunger goes, the notched side goes to the left side of the gun. All right. So then trigger bar, go back on the trigger, slide that into place. Alright. So now once I've got it to that point, I partially install the trigger retaining pin. So I push down on the spring just enough to get the pin by, and then push it through the trigger. Now you don't want to push it in, you want to push it in just far enough to where it'll hold the trigger in place, because you need to leave space for the bolt lock to fit in there. So on mine, my plunger has rotated 180 degrees. Just gotta spin it back around. Maybe not. Okay. So this little tab here, that little pin, needs to go in this little notch right here first. So you slide that down in there, and then the whole thing will be able to move forward, and you'll be able to line up the pin. Just kind of hold your tongue right, and that pin will slide all the way through there. So now it's seated, and that trigger assembly is all together. I leave the plunger spring and the plunger out until after I have everything else installed. So now I'll move on to the Sear. Sear, I like to take the pin, Sear pin, and put it in just till it kind of pokes through the frame. Now the spring, the long arm goes down against the left-hand side of the firearm, and there's a pin down in here. You might be able to see it right there. It needs to go, the long arm needs to go between that pin and the magwell housing. Alright? And it can be kind of hard to do. Okay, now the Sear, if you look at the Sear, it has a notched part on it, and that notched part is there for the spring to fit in there. So that needs to go on the left-hand side of the firearm as well. Okay. Now, when you install this, you want the short arm of that spring on the forward side of the Sear. That way, if you were to take the Sear, see how I'm pulling it forward with this punch? The spring will spring it back. Okay? That's really important. Make sure you get it on that side of the Sear. Alright, so now I've got that installed, and I'm going to take the safety. Stick the safety in, and I pull the Sear forward. So now I'm using the safety to hold the Sear in place. Alright. Take your bolt lock lever, alright, and it's got a little notch on it that goes on that this little pin here. So that engages on there. Take your hammer pin, slide it through, and I push it through just enough to where the safety, it's engaged the safety. Now at this point, I take my trigger spring, my trigger plunger, put those in, okay? Then you take your hammer, and the hammer bushing has a little bit of a raised edge on it, and that goes inside of this hole cut in the trigger bar. All right. So now that all slides down in. And this, for me, this is about the hardest part of the whole deal. Sometimes I got to take a punch, kind of wiggle and move stuff around. There, it just fell into place. Okay, so now that is fully seated. And again, having that magazine disconnect removed and using that Clark hammer bushing makes removal and installation of stuff inside of this gun much easier. Much easier. Alright, so now that we've got it to this point, we're going to test it. So, put it on safety. Oh, sorry, that's fire. So we've got it on fire. If I pull forward on the hammer, pull the trigger, it fires. Okay. Put it back on safe. I can't pull the trigger. Hammer doesn't disengage. Alright. So now that is correct. I'll put it back on fire. Now if you're going to do that, you need to have, and you don't have the magazine disconnect in, you need to remember to put the magazine, otherwise you won't be able to pull the trigger anyways. Okay, so that's together. Now we'll reassemble the bolt. Your spring and your little keeper here, there's a curved, see the curve on that? That needs to go up. Alright, and the spring is aft and the keeper is forward. So that drops down into that little slot. Okay. Then your firing pin drops in there also. And you'll know you've got it engaged correctly. If you push forward on the firing pin, it should return back. Okay. So you're going to have to put forward pressure on that. Slide the retaining pin in there. It's just a slip fit. And so now that firing pin's installed. Take the recoil spring. Forward part slides in first. Just pry forward on the aft part. And line it up there. Now the bolt's assembled. Okay. So now you're ready to put the barrel receiver assembly back on. Now, this little hole down here engages on this notch right here, this lug. Alright? So it assembles together like that. Okay. Now, my gun does not require me to use a hammer to tap on the barrel or anything like that to get them together. Like I said, it's loose enough to where it just slides together. So that's mated now. Now the bolt, need to make sure the hammer's down so you can slide the bolt in. So you slide the bolt in. All right. Now if you don't have the magazine disconnect, insert the magazine, pull the trigger, and take a punch, and you're going to push the hammer forward. Alright? That will allow room for this mainspring housing to install. Okay. So the mainspring housing slides in, pops in there. Alright? So now you've got the hammer bar needs to engage in a divot on this mainspring housing in here. So you have to tilt the gun back, and you'll know you've got it correct when this mainspring housing has a little spring to it. When I push it in, it'll spring back. Okay? That means that hammer bar is down in that divot. Little malfunction there. Alright, so now that you've got that correct, push this lever up and forward. Now the firearm is together. Okay? So now you want to check it. So you're going to make sure everything's operating correctly. So take your empty magazine, install it in the firearm. We'll charge the handle. Okay, the bolt lock is working correctly. Locks back when the magazine is empty. We'll pull that out. Okay, so it charges fine. I don't feel any binding. Okay, nothing feels like it's grinding in there. So now we'll check the trigger. So, let's see here, we are on fire. Okay, it works. Okay, now we'll put it on safe. It does not fire. Put it back on fire. Fires. Now I'm holding the trigger down. I'm going to pull the charging handle. Alright. Put the bolt down. Now slowly release the trigger and you'll feel a click. That's where it's re-engaging everything in there. So now at that point I'll pull the trigger back and it fires. Okay. The firearm is working correctly. Completely disassembled, completely reassembled. So that is how you completely disassemble and completely reassemble a Ruger Mark III. The Mark IIs and Mark Is are similar. Mark IIs and Mark Is, I believe, don't have the magazine disconnect and there's no loaded chamber indicator on them. So thank you for watching. I'm probably going to do a couple more videos on this firearm. So please subscribe, please like, leave some comments, let me know what you think of my reviews, what I could do better, if you want me to review something specifically. So, thanks again, have a good one.